Today, we're diving into a whirlwind of mass firings, the resignation program, and the nonstop push to reduce the total federal workforce. This is being led by President Trump, by Elon Musk. Can you appeal it? Let's get into it. The mass firings have begun across multiple U.S. government agencies. And it's not just a few layoffs here or there. This is a full-blown purge. The termination letters are being sent out to thousands, if not tens of thousands of federal employees. We're looking at over 3,000 in the Forest Service, over 1,000 in the VA, OPM's cutting, and also Department of Education, they've let go over 150 people. At the SBA, at least 45 recent employees got notices stating the agency finds that you are not fit for continued employment because of your ability, knowledge, and skills do not fit the current needs, and your performance has not been adequate. In many cases, these were people that started this month, and in other cases, these are people that started 11 months ago. They were in their last month, and it did not matter. This is an example of one of the emails people received in their inboxes. This one's from SBA. The first few paragraphs talk about being a probationary employee. Then it states, it has been determined that your continued employment does not promote the efficiency of the service because you failed to demonstrate fitness for continued federal employment. Then here at the bottom it says, you have the right to appeal to the MSPB within 30 days if you believe you were terminated for partisan political reasons or because of your marital status. We're going to talk about appeals here in a minute. But you have to understand that these termination letters, these impact real people with real families that have real bills. Now, in one case, he had a GS employee. This was his last month of probation. He had an excellent review for his mid-year, excellent performance review. That didn't matter. He was terminated and said, up until 2 weeks ago, this was an absolute dream job. Now, it's become an absolute nightmare because of what is going on. I have small children and a mortgage to pay. This represents thousands of people in his exact same circumstance. And the numbers are only going to increase. If you remember, we have over 200,000 federal employees that were recently hired that are on probation right now. One CFPB career employee said, it's just so stressful to deal with. It's hard to take. We all feel that we will be next. This is being seen as amazing progress by President Trump and Elon Musk. President Trump, he's looking at a few of these federal agencies as if they shouldn't exist, as if he wants to dismantle them. He looked specifically at the Department of Education. He called it a con job. Elon Musk recently, I think it was just yesterday, he was in Dubai, and he said bluntly, we need to delete federal agencies. Whatever your perspective is about federal employees or the federal government, there are real federal government employees that provide value to the American people. There are some agencies and offices that actually generate revenue. If you look at HUD in the way of mortgages, they generate revenue for the federal government. The same thing to a lesser extent, perhaps, Department of Interior or the USDA. There are functions that generate revenue. They're just not taking the revenue. Among all this chaos, Trump has scored a recent legal victory when it comes to the deferred resignation program. That program was halted temporarily by a judge in Massachusetts. A lot of people thought that he was potentially going to kill it, that it wouldn't go further. But it has been allowed to resume. And as soon as it resumed, I believe on Wednesday at 7:20, that's when the cutoff was. Nobody else was allowed to participate in the program. A total of 75,000 federal employees opted into the program. And as we talked about earlier, really, these are people that were on probation. A lot of them, they were fearful. And also people that were fixing to retire or they wanted to transition anyway, they decided to opt into the program. I've talked to some federal employees that were considering all the way up to the last minute, and then they missed the deadline, and now they're not able to take it. One lady in particular, she was 63, already eligible for Social Security. She was thinking about taking it, and then she kept her eye off the news for a few hours, and she's not able to take it. That's how fast things are moving. Now, this program, if you did take it, you understand you're supposed to get your full pay and benefits all the way till September 30th. And I think more people wanted to take it, but they didn't have the trust in the current administration to fulfill their part of the bargain. But there will be plenty more legal battles. There's another lawsuit, surprise, that is challenging the RIF from the executive order that further officiated DOGE, the most recent executive order that talked about DOGE. There's guidance in there that all agencies have to submit a RIF, a reorganization plan, to do a reduction in force for their federal employees. So now we're seeing lawsuits already filed for that issue. Now, some people think this purge was pushed or forced by OPM, and there's some truth in that. But you have to understand that OPM also stated that this is soft guidance. It is ultimately up to the agency. So if you're receiving a termination notice, understand that this is being done by your agency's leadership. It's not coming all the way from OPM, because agencies do have discretion. Not all probationary employees are receiving termination. Look at the VA. The VA has something like a little bit over 40,000 employees that are on probation. And currently right now, as I'm recording, a little over 1,000 were actually terminated. Individuals in mission critical positions, and also if your position is grounded by statute, those people are more so safe. More specifically, OPM told agencies to focus on low performers, people that get the 1 or 2 block, the bottom, not mass firings. They didn't say do mass firings, but they also at the same time, they turned around and asked for a list of everybody on probation and told agencies to provide in 200 characters why the agency should retain those people. Not every agency was given the opportunity to write up that brief summary. There's some agencies, people I talked to, where because the individual was a supervisor and they were on probation, they were not allowed to write up any justification. So then we have agencies like the CFPB who did the opposite, and they sent termination notices to all of their probationary staff, marking a step to really close the agency. At the SBA, the notices actually went out early. They went out to everybody early. They were resent. So you know, if you have experience with Outlook, that somebody can recall their message is exactly what they did. They sent it out early. It was a mistake. They recalled it. So you get a notice. First, you get the termination notice. Then you get a notice that they're trying to recall it. And they say, hey, don't worry, that wasn't for you. But then just within 24 hours, they turn around and they send you the same thing. But this time it has the correct information and your name is on it. So that was also happening, causing further stress to federal employees within that agency. At the Department of Energy, there was a meeting and leaders were saying, okay, I think we should retain 80%. We should keep them. But then that was later determined not to be feasible. The goal was 2/3. So like 66% of all probationary people were to be terminated. And in many of these situations, the federal employee is being interviewed to keep their job and interviewed to keep it. Not to get a new job, but to keep their current position. They have to justify, what have you done? What are you working on? But let's go ahead and zoom in further on the probationary period. This is usually between 1 and 3 years when you first enter the federal government. It's typically 12 months. The big question here, the burning question is, can you appeal? Some people can. Check this out. Probationary employees in the competitive service or serving under the Veterans Recruitment Appointment do have limited appeal rights to the board by regulation. Then we see this part again where it says you may appeal your termination if it was not required by statute, only if you allege it was based on partisan political reasons or marital status. I think a lot of people, lawyers especially, can make a case that this was done based on partisan politics. Now, whether you think you can appeal or not, my advice to you is to appeal. Appeal. The worst thing that's going to happen is that you're going to get rejected or you're going to get denied. But if you suddenly lost your job, you thought you had a stable, secure job, and now you do not, at the very bare minimum, you should appeal. The MSPB, which is the appeal board, it has a phone number, an email address, and a website. I'll put that on the screen right now. I'll also link this document that I'm showing down below. The human stories are heartbreaking. You have the multiple messages, the confusion with the recall. You have positive reviews going ignored. Let's say you were on a 24-month probation, and after the 12 months, you went ahead and you got a positive review. You had an outstanding rating. Maybe you even got a step quality increase. They're ignoring that. A lot of agencies, they're just looking past your strong performance review. Now, I was in a room the other day with a lot of federal employees, a lot of senior leaders, and there's a lot of uncertainty. Now, there's further reassurance if you're in a position or if you're in an office right now that's grounded in statute. It's grounded in law. It's not simply just an initiative or it's not simply a new program, but it's grounded in statute. There is some reassurance with that. But you need to stay in contact with your supervisor, your union representative, see what's going on in the news. But more importantly, I would say keep your head down, keep working, and only focus on what you can actually control. And do a thought experiment with yourself. If you had to get a new job in the next 30 days, in the next month, if you absolutely needed a new job, what would that look like? That's plan B. You need to have a plan B, not because of this current administration, not because of all the chaos that we're seeing throughout the federal workforce and with politics, but you should just always have a plan B. Whether you're for smaller government or larger government or you're somewhere in between, there are a lot of federal employees that have the public interest in mind, that are doing the best job that they're able to do. Now, there's a lot of negative stories about rude federal employees or about federal employees who are lazy. And that's not the entire workforce. I would say that's not even half. That's not even 2/3. That's a percent. Sure, it is a percent. But if I were to go today, in a couple of hours, if I walked into a law firm with 500 lawyers and I looked at the lowest performing 50 lawyers, I would probably have a negative perception of that entire firm, that entire organization. I would be left with a negative taste in my mouth. And that is much how I believe the federal workforce is being looked at right now. As we enter into another month of the federal hiring freeze, and in the next week, I believe next week, all federal employees, for the most part, they need to start showing up 5 days a week. So we're entering a new era. We're entering a new phase. And all these phases, they have cycles. I mean, this is the cycle for at least the next year, maybe the next 3 years. We're going to have to see. But if you have questions about that, about federal hiring freeze, about coming into the office, I did a 2-hour live stream and I answered dozens of questions. A lot of these questions could be on your mind. If you're interested in that, I want you to check this out next. If you need a federal resume, check out the links down below. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.